Welcome once again. It's Brian Burke here from Thrive Now, and we are currently in between a course of listening to thrive. And I've mentioned a couple of times the idea of listening to the story. Today, I want to take the opportunity to just unpack that a little bit more so that we can learn and grow in our understanding of what does it actually mean to listen to the story and hopefully then to be able to walk away with a greater experience of listening to stories as we listen. See, when we listen, we can either listen just for details or facts, or we can listen for a story. I believe that we all have a story. I believe that particularly as we listen, there's an opportunity to hear more than details and facts, but there's an opportunity to hear the story that has been told. Listening for the story is holistic. When we listen to the story, it's transformational. When we listen only for facts, it brings us back to just a transactional exchange. It lacks meaning and purpose. We feel hollow. There's an emptiness. And indeed, when we only listen for details and facts, often we're not really hearing what's going on. We're not understanding what I'd say is meaning. See, when we listen for facts, that's literally what it is. But when we listen for a story, we're listening for meaning. We're listening for understanding. We're listening for purpose. See, as we listen to someone's story, we're listening to the meaning. We're not just hearing details, we're listening. What does that mean to the person that's speaking? We're listening to what it represents, what it looks like in their life. And that's a really big change in how we listen. And it's a really beautiful change to be able to listen for meaning and purpose, to listen for understanding, not just listen for details. Let me take that one step further. If you just hear details from me, then you haven't understood me, because my life is more than just details. There's more to me than just facts, and the same with you. There's more to you than just facts or details. But as we learn to listen to the story, we're learning to listen and appreciate, yes, the facts and the details that are being said, but in that same scenario, in that same picture, we're listening to the story. Remember, we're talking about dancing. There is an exchange of facts, of details in the waltz that we spoke about, but there's an exchange of story as well. And that's a wonderful part of being able to listen to the story. It takes us from being transactional to being transformational. Now, as we learn what it looks like more to listen to the story, to consider, well, how do I do that? How do I achieve that? One of the big first steps is to become other-centered. See, listening to the story is more than just about me. It's becoming aware of the other person. It's becoming aware of them. It's not me. I'm not just trying to get a fact or a detail. I'm trying to listen to their story in an interpersonal communication. And so that's a great way of starting to look at it, as we saying, what does it look like to listen to the story? It means we're intentional, we're invested in trying to become more aware. You see, listening to the story is a process of developing our awareness. And our awareness isn't just about, for example, the daylight, the color green. Is more awareness, well, how significant is that? What does that mean to them? It's more awareness of the whole picture. So some other great benefits of listening to stories is that we simply hear more. You see, I'm tempted, if I just listen to facts, then what happens is I can hone in on what I'm trying to hear, and I can miss more of what's been said, because when I listen to the story, I hear more, because listening becomes a pleasure. It becomes a joy. I'm more tolerant to hear, to listen, and I'm more interested. Because when I just listen for a fact or a details, it can be a bit boring. It can just be blah. But if I'm listening to the story that's been spoken, there's a rich tapestry. There's a wonderful journey that I can go on, that I'm privileged to go on, to learn more about what's been spoken to me, about the person that's talking. I can start to enter their story and learn more about it, and that is wonderful. That becomes interesting, that becomes exciting, that becomes something that is rewarding, that I want to invest in. So listening to a story, I'm more likely to hear more, because I'm going to stay in that space longer, but I'm also now becoming someone who's inquiring. I'm going on an adventure. I'm curious. There's a posture of curiosity, because I want to know more about that story. And that's why we hear more, we see more in that space, because I'm no longer just hearing details, I'm seeing a story, so I see more, which is fantastic. I hope that can just settle a little bit with your understanding there. I am no longer hearing details, but I'm seeing a story, which is wonderful. It now is a part of a greater narrative, a greater picture, and that's fantastic. I also have the ability to know more, because remember I spoke before that when we listen to the story, we become more other-centered. Well, without that attribute, if we just listen for facts and details, I'm tempted to become more me-centered in the way that I hear and listen. It's kind of like, what do I need to get out of this transaction? What do I need to obtain in order to do what I'm doing? But when I listen to a story, become confronted, but in a good way, with the reality that the person speaking to me, their story didn't start when they started to speak to me, nor did it end when they finished speaking to me. But that I am actually stepping into a part of their story, which is big. Could I give you a picture of that? Could I give you a picture of healthcare, of someone coming into a hospital, and then a nurse or a doctor, a physio, whoever it might be, comes in and assesses them. Goes through, for example, an assessment form of some kind, and they get details, they get facts. But if they're just looking at those details of facts, they miss the story. They miss that person started their story before they went to hospital, and that they're probably looking at wanting more of their story beyond hospital. There's more happening in their story than just the facts that have been told. That's a really, really big shift in how we look at things. The ability to listen to story means that I'm appreciative and I value and I acknowledge that the person speaking to me, their story didn't just start when I started listening. It didn't stop when I stopped listening. And that causes me to value and to appreciate more. Therefore, I will know more. I will be wanting to know more instead of just a segment, a snapshot. Remember, before we spoke about that we can listen in a holistic way or not, in a compartmentalized way. And again, I'm coming back to a holistic understanding of listening. When we listen to story, it moves us from listening to, if you could say, a snapshot, a segment, and it brings us into a place of valuing, appreciating the wholeness of the one who's talking to us. the wholeness of their story. Look, it's been great once again catching up. I know that this information that we're discussing and learning in this course is transformation. And I really want to encourage you, please don't, be distracted by going, oh, look, story, that's easy to understand. Take time, pause, reflect, meditate on, consider what it looks like to listen to story. A lot of what we've spoken about today was interpersonal story. But just before we go, I really want to add too, it's not just interpersonal stories that we can listen to. See, if we learn to listen to the story as well, it can help us in so many areas of our life. For example, when we're learning maths or science, have you heard it being said, if we can start to get a sense of the picture or the pattern, then it can make sense and we can know it. And that's so true. I remember in my first year of university, just a couple of years ago, when I was doing chemistry. I hadn't done chemistry at school. I was struggling. I didn't understand it. It wasn't making sense. It seemed dry. It didn't have much excitement to me. And it was fragmented. My ability to get the concepts together just wasn't happening. And I'd made myself, if you could say, redundant. And I just thought, look, I can't do chemistry. I'm no good at this. I'm not going to understand this. And I gave up to some extent. Later on in when I was doing university in different subjects, and it was started to relate back to what I was studying with the body and health and so forth, chemistry made sense. You see, the difference was when I was able to link chemistry, if you say the details, the facts, to the story.